Aaron came home bleeding. Luke was sitting on the front porch, messing with his bike chain when he saw his little brother stumble down the driveway. Aaron's hand was pressed against the back of his head, and something dark was dripping through his fingers. Jesus, Aaron, what happened? Luke dropped his bike and rushed over. Aaron looked up at him with those weird glassy eyes of his, blinking slowly like he couldn't quite process the question. I fell, he said, voice flat and distant. Luke's heart started pounding as he grabbed Aaron's shoulders. You're bleeding. Come on, let's get you to Mom. Aaron didn't resist, just followed Luke inside the house, moving in that slow, jerky way he always did, like something inside him was just off. Luke didn't like to think too much about it, because whenever he did, his mind started going to weird places. As Luke led Aaron up the stairs, something gnawed at the back of his mind. Aaron wasn't crying, wasn't even upset. That wasn't right. A kid his age would be freaking out after a fall like this, especially with blood running down the back of his neck. But Aaron? He acted like it was no big deal, like he didn't feel a thing. They made it to the bathroom, and Luke sat Aaron down on the toilet lid. Hold still, he muttered, grabbing a towel and soaking it under the faucet. His hands were shaking as he dabbed at the back of Aaron's head. The blood was thick and dark, but something about it didn't look right. It was oily, slick. Not the normal kind of blood you'd expect. Luke's stomach twisted as he wiped away more of the mess, feeling around for the cut. His fingers grazed something hard, and his heart skipped a beat. He pushed aside Aaron's hair and found screws, 2 tiny screws embedded in the back of Aaron's skull. What the hell? Luke whispered, his voice barely a breath. His fingers trembled as he pressed gently, and with a soft click, the screws popped loose. A square piece of Aaron's scalp shifted under Luke's fingers. Luke's breath caught in his throat. He didn't want to, but he had to look. The piece of skin lifted, and Luke found himself staring into Aaron's head. But instead of blood and bone, there were gears. Shiny, twisting, interlocking gears, all spinning in different directions. Some large, some so small they looked like specks of dust. Luke's hand jerked back and his heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. He felt sick. Aaron! What are you? Aaron didn't even flinch. He just blinked those glassy eyes, tilting his head like he didn't understand the question. Will I have to go back to Dad now? Luke froze, the words making his brain feel like it was short-circuiting. What do you mean, go back to Dad? No, we're going to Mom. We need to... No, Aaron interrupted. If you tell Mom, Dad will be mad. I have to go back to him. He fixes me. Luke stared at him, trying to make sense of what was happening. What the hell do you mean Dad fixes you? You're not a... Aaron just blinked again. He made me. Luke's stomach twisted, and for a moment he thought he might throw up. His mind raced, trying to piece together what Aaron was saying. Dad made him? Number. That couldn't be right. He'd seen Aaron grow up. He'd seen his brother stumble through life like any other kid. But now he wasn't sure what he'd seen. Suddenly, Luke remembered something. A year ago, he'd followed Dad to the clock shop. It was a Saturday, just like any other Saturday, and Dad had taken Aaron with him, like always. Luke was curious. He wasn't allowed to go to the shop, even though he was older than Aaron and smarter too. Dad always said it was too complicated for him. Luke had followed them, sneaking around the back of the old shop. He'd peeked through the dusty window, expecting to see clocks and gears and tools. But what he saw instead froze him in place. Aaron was sitting in a chair, his head tilted forward. Dad was leaning over him, a tiny screwdriver in hand, tightening something on the back of Aaron's neck. Luke's breath had caught in his throat, and he'd backed away from the window, heart racing. Not sure what he had just witnessed. He hadn't told anyone, and now, here he was, looking at the proof. Luke took a deep breath, trying to calm his shaking hands. He couldn't deal with this. He didn't want to deal with this, but he couldn't just leave Aaron sitting here with his head open like some kind of broken toy. Turn around, Luke said, his voice hollow. I need to fix it. Aaron obeyed without hesitation, turning his head and sitting perfectly still. Luke reached for the screws, his fingers trembling as he twisted them back into place, sealing the panel on the back of Aaron's head. When he was done, he stepped back, staring at his little brother, his heart pounding in his chest. Does it hurt? Luke asked quietly, still trying to process everything. Aaron shook his head. Number, it never hurts. Luke's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to feel. This was Aaron, his brother, the weird, jerky kid who didn't fit in anywhere, but who still loved him, and now he knew why. Aaron wasn't real. We need to go to Dad, Luke said finally, his voice flat. He's the only one who can explain this. Aaron just nodded, like he'd been expecting this all along. The ride to the clock shop felt longer than usual. Luke's mind raced, bouncing between disbelief and anger. Dad had made Aaron, built him. How? Why? None of it made sense. They pulled up to the shop, and Luke took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel tight. Aaron sat beside him, still as a statue, his glassy eyes fixed straight ahead. Luke wasn't sure if he should be terrified or angry. Probably both. Inside, Dad was hunched over his workbench, tinkering with a pile of gears. He didn't even look up when the door creaked open. "Dad," Luke said, his voice tight. Dad glanced up, his face calm. "What's wrong?" Luke stared at him, the words stuck in his throat. He glanced at Aaron, then back at Dad. "You need to explain, now." Dad sighed, setting down his tools. "You found out, didn't you?" Luke clenched his fists. "Yeah, I found out. Aaron isn't a real person. You built him. Why?" Dad looked tired, older than Luke had ever seen him. "We lost Aaron when he was 2, he said quietly. "It broke your mother. It broke both of us. I couldn't stand it, so I built him. I thought if I could make something perfect, we'd be okay again." Luke's stomach churned. "He's not perfect," he spat. "He's not even human." Dad closed his eyes for a moment. "I know, but he's still your brother." Luke stared at him, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. His brother. Yeah, Aaron wasn't real. He wasn't human, but he was still Aaron. Luke took a shaky breath, turning to Aaron, who was sitting there watching them both like none of this really mattered. "Come on, Aaron," Luke said softly. "Let's go home." And as they walked out of the shop together, Luke realized that no matter what Aaron was made of, he was still his brother, and maybe that was enough.